hope Dr. Mary-Louise Felix is there. She's an expert in excuse me, science marine biology. Dr. Mary-Louise Felix, you have the floor.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. And protocols having previously been established, I'm going to go straight. And no, I do not have a video, so I'm going to apologize. I hope that my voice is going to be entertaining enough. What I wish to touch on today, there have been a number of presentations on all the wonderful things that we do know that we can achieve in St. Lucia. And we are very fortunate that a lot has been achieved by a number of persons. However, we do recognize the shortcomings that we face, both in research and innovation, in not just science, but also with regards to social sciences, with regards to the arts, with regards to culture. We've also heard of the many efforts being made, the amount of research into identifying how can we do better, and the many efforts being made for us to improve on this. If I am to focus on our education program, because the question begs, why are we not more innovative? Why is it with all the research as to how we can improve on our productivity and innovation, we are still failing to do so? Why is it that we seem to know where we want to go? We even know, to some extent, what we need to do, and yet it is not happening. We can also ask the question that we are putting certain efforts forward, but we do not seem to be getting the desired results. I lecture at the South Louis Community College, and I therefore find myself engaging with young persons who, for the most part, we believe are the cream of the crop. They have been able to overcome many of the challenges that several of our students are facing, in that they've been able to reach this point of tertiary education. However, when asked to take the first step, to step out of the box, to develop research ideas and innovation, these same students who have achieved so much are either, and in the past I said they're unwilling, but sometimes, or right now, I question, are they able to do so? Are they able to think independently from what they are fed by the lecturers, or by the books, or by the television, or by the internet? And so we ask our students, or we ask ourselves, why is it that students who have reached this stage of tertiary education are not able to think for themselves, are not interested, it seems, in research, and are really very content to sit back and absorb information, and then to regurgitate it? And what does that say for our society? How are we going to address the many problems we are facing, some problems that we've not faced in the past? And it means that we need to have persons who can think on their feet. Where are we falling short? So I look back at the students and I look back at the education career, and I have listened to the past speakers who speak about all that the Ministry of Education is attempting to do. And yet we have students at tertiary level that we have a science fair, and I ask for persons to step forward Here you have the opportunity. I will provide you with the resources. What are you interested in finding out? What problem are you interested in fixing, or at least exploring? And I get no students. But when we look back at our young persons, our 7-year-olds, our 8-year-olds, our 5-year-olds, who are full of the need to ask questions and to explore, they have so much enthusiasm. And then they go to school, and yes, for a lot of them, except the privileged few who may go to private school where there are only 10 in the class, but for most of our young people, they are sitting in a class with 35 students and one teacher who has from a mandate by her principal, who has a mandate from the Ministry of Education, that so much must be achieved in this period of time. And your success will be measured by how much your students can regurgitate in an hour on a piece of paper. And therefore, this 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, with all the interest that we want to see in our tertiary level students, is told to sit and be quiet whilst I pass this information on to you. Take a paper and pencil and write it down. Go home and study it, and tomorrow when I come in, you have to have the capacity to regurgitate it for me. And the child who is interested in, when I am teaching one-on-one, he wants to know how does a bird fly, is told that you are being a nuisance and you have to sit and be silent. And the child who wants to know why are some people respond to a social pressure in one way whilst others don't. They may not be able to articulate this, but they're curious, but there's no one to either answer the question or to encourage them to research it. And so from this age, our students are told that you have to be quiet and regurgitate, learn and regurgitate. And our education system judges you based on this through the common entrance and then all the other exams the student faces in the secondary and primary and tertiary schools. Therefore, it means that with all due respect to all our great luminaries that are here right now and all the others, we have a situation where everything that we are hoping for is really based on a foundation that we have persons who are curious and are interested and have the capacity and the resources to do research. But this is not the case. And therefore, all our well-meaning recommendations likely will not take place, and that we will have another knowledge fair in 10 years, and all of us will be here again making the same recommendations and have not achieved anything. So what do? I think we need to start encouraging our children to play. We need to encourage our children to explore. We need to have innovative labs. We need to have playrooms in our schools from very young. We need to cut this humongous program of work that we are asking our young children to do. I have friends with kids who are 7 and who have to cram, who need to know who is the prime minister of every country in the Caribbean. My goodness, why are we doing that to our children? And these are the same children who can barely read or write. We need to change this and make 30% of the school day playtime. Let the children go out and explore. Let them ask questions. And yes, one may say, but who's going to do it? Because we have one teacher for 35 kids. Well, we need volunteers. We need trained volunteers. Maybe we can lean on our Peace Corps, our Japanese volunteers, so that we have persons to man the labs. And therefore, I'm saying a lab, but we're talking about kids that may be interested in the social sciences. Put them on a bus, bring up kids and bring them out. Let us reduce the workload of our students when they are young, and let us encourage them to think for themselves. Let us change. We've been saying it for years. I know that the ministry is really looking at the common entrance and all the other exams. Well, you need to stop looking and you need to act. We need to make a difference from the time young people are young. Let us let our children ask questions, explore, and let us not judge our children on how many questions they can get right on an exam. It pains me every common entrance when the common entrance results come out. And so many people are praising the kids who have passed for St. Joseph's Convent and for St. Mary's College. And I think of this poor child who's not academic but curious and who got maybe 30% in the exam. This child is forgotten. This child is told that you not going to make it here. And therefore, it is not surprising that our children, when they get to tertiary education, and when they leave Sir Arthur, because our program of education is the same, when they leave and they go out into the world, and an officer from Lucia says, we have a problem on the line, and then our student who got fantastic grades needs to go and check a book or his phone to get the answer because he cannot think. And then we are surprised and we are saying the schools are not producing what we need. Well, you are correct. We are not producing. But until we find a solution and we start from small, we will continue not to produce. We do have the few that, despite the poor system, do achieve. So we do have the Parry husbands, and is it Mr. Noel, and we have those who are here today, that despite the limitations, you've risen above it. But very few students are going to be able to follow in your footsteps. So those of you in the private sector, because the Ministry of Education cannot do it alone. The Ministry of Education cannot afford really to put an innovative lab in every school without the input and the stepping forward of the private sector and our businesses. So my final words are that we do need to see a change, and a change has to start from very young, but we do need a lot of support from the private sector to make it happen. And we do need the persons in the Ministry of Education to themselves step out of the box and start to look at real solutions to the real problems we face. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Felix. As you spoke, I thought of a period in our lives when maybe the school system is killing our initiative. Maybe there's a zone there between 5 and 6 and 7 when the ebullience of a young person is thwarted, dampened, and you're told to conform, absorb and regurgitate. And I heard Dr. Felix is making an appeal for that not to happen. And I like the idea of play because you learn so much. We move forward now and we ask our lady from Labrie, a business lady, and also partnering with Mr. Callis. Well, Ms. Laura Japierre, you have the floor now.
Just to say that the chair is going to be brutal with the time because we do have to move along, so I'm going to be very, yes, with the time, including the time for our chair in between. The chair has the duty of trying to put everything in context, but I do wish all speeches would shorten. Thank you.
Is it because it's me? Before I begin my presentation, I just want to say to Dr. Marie Louise Felix that I felt that she was speaking about my partner, Mr. Carlos Noel, and I am so thankful every day that he was not a sit down and listen child, and that he grew up to be the innovator that he is. Thank God for that. There's a lot to be said for children who buck the rules at an early age. They're not being miserable, they're not being troublesome, they're not being disobedient. They just know from an early age what their destiny is supposed to be. So thank God for that. Permit me to adopt the protocol already established. My name is Laura Japierre, and I am indeed the other half of Invictus. We are a climate change adaptation company, and our focus is on smart ocean technologies. I think by now you would know that our first product is the Life Cube, and we're very proud of that. We recently have won the Get in the Ring St. Lucia edition, and we are on our way, hopefully, God willing and COVID willing, to Montreal in February, so look out for our journey to Montreal. Enterprises worldwide are constantly bombarded with ongoing disruptions, be it technologies where we move from manual to automation, or biological, and we're experiencing that right now, the pandemic, the novel coronavirus, COVID-19, or biospheric climate change. Entrepreneurs are now tasked with the responsibility of quickly responding to these disruptions. R&D is crucial to innovation and a key factor in developing new competitive advantages. For companies such as ours, Invictus, it is the holy grail. How do we parlay the three pillars of sustainability, profits, the planet, and people into products, solutions that would enable consumers, clients, customers to meet their needs and requirements without impinging upon the requirements and the needs of those to come? We need to have buy-in. As I said earlier, we are on our way to the global meetup of Get in the Ring in Montreal. And one of the things that will be asked of us, you have this product. It is revolutionary. It is innovative. But what is your country's buy-in? We are asking for buy-in from the outside. We are looking for investors. We are looking for people to take an interest in what we produce, in what we have innovated, in what we've invented. But what about us right here in St. Lucia? We like to boast, and I think today there are, two or three presenters have spoken about that. We like to boast that we have the highest rate of Nobel laureates per capita in the world. But we are hard-pressed to find Derek Walcott's books, his poems, on our book lists for school. We are hard-pressed to find, or our people do not have an appreciation for Sir Arthur Lewis's economic model. We are the winners of last year, 2019's Prime Minister's Award for Innovation. But is our technology used here in St. Lucia? As Mr. Romulus spoke about earlier, we have exported to Nauru, and the unit is being used there, and we are getting praised over there. We have also exported to Tanzania, albeit in a different format, but we are over there. And we are being praised for our product. But what about right here in St. Lucia? Are we being used? Have successive governments found it within their purview to implement the product that we have? And I'm speaking about the Life Cube, the desalinator. For a small business to grow, we must constantly be focused on R&D, as it feeds and supports directly technology and knowledge. But we do not always have the coffers. That is why it is imperative for governments to not only pay lip service to R&D and innovation, but invest in small and medium enterprises. For instance, Invictus, we're small. We don't even have an R&D budget per se. We don't have a budget for anything, really. But we don't. We don't have a budget for anything. We're just making it up as we go. But we have plans in the near future to have or to implement what we call the KISS, Kids in Science, which is a playground, and that seems to be a common theme, a playground for children to learn. We have an advanced lab. We're looking to improve that and to upgrade that. But once we are in a position, we will be opening that lab up to the public to select students to come in to learn science, to learn to play, to learn to innovate, to learn to be creative. We're not big by any stretch of the imagination, except in our minds and in our innovation, in our creativity. And we intend to share that with the younger ones, because as Dr. Marie-Louise Felix says, it starts when they're very young, not when they're at the secondary school level stage. We are challenged, of course. We are challenged because we have innovations that sometimes we are afraid to put out there because we don't have patents on them. And we do not want to be like Trinidad and Tobago and the pan, wherein they do not hold the patent for the steel pan that is being held by George Whitmire and Harvey Price of the United States of America. But yet the steel pan was invented in Trinidad. We don't want to be like that. We are competing with larger firms, and note I said larger, not better firms, with bigger budgets. And as I said earlier, we don't have a budget for anything, but we are mindful. We are mindful of the Sustainable Development Goals, which we are guided by and which is the impetus for everything that we do. And I can think off the top of my head 3 Sustainable Development Goals that we hold near and dear to us. And that is SDG 6, where we speak about clean water and sanitation. The Life Cube does that marvelously. SDG 13 and 14, and my partner would have spoken about it earlier, the Smart FAD, we actually incorporate that into our Smart FAD. And SDG 13 speaks to climate change adaptation and its impacts. We do that with the Life Cube as well as the Smart FAD, as well as SDG 14, which speaks to sustainable use of our oceans. And guess what? We also have an app for that. We do that with the Life Cube and the Smart FAD, after all. We are a climate change adaptation company, and we focus on smart ocean technologies. Now, the curious thing about SDG 14, sustainable use of our oceans, it feeds into SDG 1, which speaks to no poverty, and SDG 2, which speaks to zero hunger, because once we can sustain ourselves with our fish, that is, we're speaking about our food, and we're speaking about having more food so that we can feed our nation. No poverty, zero hunger. We have it in our 238 square miles to do something to impact not just our lives, but the lives of persons around the world. Let us not let it die. Let us not let it be a soundbite that we have innovative people. Let us show the world we have innovative people, and we're doing something about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, especially for remaining within the time.
Thank you, Laura, for your presentation and connecting everything to the SDGs and the importance of patents. I think we have an attorney who's going to be speaking later on, and perhaps she would bring that up as an issue, as a point of rectification. I would like to now welcome Richard Matthias, who is an apiculturist by nature. He's studying to be a master beekeeper at Cornell University now, and I have a pleasure in welcoming you to the podium. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to follow already established protocol. Again, that was my presentation I was waiting for. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so my name is Richard Matthias. I am the president of the Ainoa Apiculture Collective. And apiculture, by its name, we specialize and focus on bees. Next slide, please. Okay, so our organization, excuse me, has been focused on research and innovation as best we can as regards to apiculture. And over the last 18 months, we've been running a hive monitoring program where we look at 4 variables in beehives: the brood temperature, humidity, the weight, and the acoustics that come from the hive, in order to try to establish the optimal conditions for a beehive and to analyze it and cross-reference that data to see if we can find correlations between what's happening in the current climate change environment. We also have a selective breeding program, which we select the best colonies. We produce queens from the best colonies on the island and we cross-breed them and to try to establish if we can get better producing stock. And we've also focused on value-added products from the hive of higher value, which we can obviously profit better from. So in our research and innovation, as I said, we've looked at hive monitors. We use a system called the RNA hive monitoring system out of the UK. And we've also worked with a company out of India called Lepotech, and they've developed a hive monitoring app for us, which we can distribute to beekeepers in our cluster, and they can upload information as to how their hives are progressing, and we can look at that data, give them assistance via virtually, or we can directly go in and assist them. So we've tried to integrate technology into our hive apparatus, and we've also tried to mirror this implementation of technology into other Caribbean islands. So we have a project running in Trinidad where we're going to replicate a lot of the tools that we've established here in St. Lucia technologically and bring that to Trinidad as well. So we are moving forward, and as my colleague said, we are venturing beyond our shores to find some recognition, as well as try to establish our own here as well. You want a little bit more? Okay, so selective breeding, just for those of you that are sure what selective breeding is all about, we try to look at bees or colonies of bees that have the traits that we want. So we want less aggressive or more calmer bees. We want bees that have good honey production. We're also looking for bees which have good hygiene practices. Bees have, as you know, are under a lot of global threat from throughout the world with pesticides and climate change and all kinds of different new parasites and viruses which are attacking them. So one of the best things to help bees is that because they don't have an proper immune system like humans do, we like to have bees that project the greatest hygiene practices. So this is a great thing for us as well. And also we do something called instrumental insemination. So in order to crossbreed the lines of bees that we want, we actually collect drone sperm from the small male bees, and we maybe take about 20 or 30 and we would inseminate that into a female bee, and that will go into a spermatheca, and we will look for the results of that crossbreeding exercise and try to mirror that in more colonies that have the best attributes that we believe that could help us to expand our apiculture sector. Moving on to value-added products. One of the things that climate change has taught us is that as a commercial beekeeper, we produce a lot of honey, but because of the inclement weather due to the seasons, sometimes that can become unpredictable. So it's forced us and forced our organization to look into other value-added products to help sustain us. So some of the stuff we've done, we've worked with a young lady by the name of Shakira Roberts, and we produce a solid lotion. So rather than you having a lotion in a plastic bottle, She infuses it with a number of other products. It's a solid bar, but when you rub it on your skin, it melts on skin contact. So that's an environmentally good product to have. It's less plastics and it comes in a nice little paper box, and it's very good. We've done soaps, we've done candles, and probably one of our best innovations is that we've gone into the field of producing apitoxin. Apitoxin is the venom from the bees. It's quite a valuable substance. It's been used in acupuncture to help people with multiple sclerosis and other remedies for many, many years. But one of the prime uses of late is that there's been research recently that they can use it to cure certain types of breast cancer. Also, there's some kinds of stomach cancers it's been used for as well. And also, if you've got an allergic reaction to bee stings, the only way you can overcome that is for a doctor to administer low doses of apitoxin to you, so your body builds a resistance to the substance. So there's many medicinal uses and research uses for this product. It's very variable. A gram of raw apitoxin could probably cost in the range of about $30 to $40 per gram, and processed it can be anywhere from $150 to $300 per gram, depending on the compound mix that the researchers may be looking for. So we're trying to transcend from, as Mr. Romulus would say, the low-hanging fruit, beyond that to the higher value products that we can derive from the hive. We also harvest large quantities of propolis. Propolis is very good for women's fertility, treatments for diabetes. Traditionally, in the years gone by, it was the active ingredient in cough syrups. So there is a very active market because people are looking for alternatives. One of the things that we're looking at from an antibacterial standpoint for both our honey and our propolis is to see how they react in laboratory experiments to test the antibacterial properties. There has been a lot of research being done in Brazil in this regards, and we would like to mirror some of that research that's been done in Brazil, in St. Lucia, to test the antibacterial properties of the propolis that's produced by our bees in St. Lucia and the surrounding Caribbean. So if there are found, we find that there are specific times of the year where there's specific propolis, which is resins from particular trees, we may be able to harvest this and benefit from this and package this and patent this, Mr. Auger, and move forward to better things for our future. So we are really trying to innovate, do a lot of research, and diversify and grow a whole industry through our organization, especially through the help of GEF-SGP, that have been, I think, a savior for the apiculture sector. And really have been, OP6 and OP7, they have really focused on apiculture and building livelihoods through people getting into the field of apiculture. And I think some of the work we've been able to do through the assistance of GEF-SGP will enable us to innovate and help more farmers and help more beekeepers to realize the full potential of the apiculture sector. So I will not fall under the cosh of our chairperson, and I think I've finished within my 5-minute parameter. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Richard. My hand was on the mic already.
Thank you, Richard, for this succinct presentation. I must tell you, we are partnering with Richard, and we are hoping to move honey production to a national industry in St. Lucia over the next 3 to 4 years as we design an international project in apiculture and biodiversity. So thank you very much for that, Richard. Richard also has not spoken to you about apitourism, a new sector in the tourism industry that we're going to be developing very soon. We move from bees to fish, and for that we have Mr. McDome. Mr. McDome.
Thank you so kindly, my brothers and my sisters. as I take this opportunity to address you in matters relating to our fishing industry, permit me to go back to the prophet King Austin song, it's Calypso of 1980, which is prophetical. He said, "Today, when I look around in the world, what do I see? I see footprints that man have left on the sun while walking through time. I see fruit of our imaginations, fruits of our ambitions, figment of our imagination. And I ask myself, when will it end? When will it end? It is plain to see, universally, this land is not bountiful as it was, simply because in his quest for success, nothing stands in man's ways. All rivers run dry. Soon the birds wouldn't fly. The mountain will be no longer high. And when I really think of it, I just wonder why." And I could go on where he said, at the end of his Calypso, and some of the things the scripture predict truthfully come to pass. Soil that wouldn't bear, children making children to be part of this growing mass. And I ask, if this is progress, how long will it last? Today, I sat around and I listened to many of those who came before me to present on the various subject matter that confronts us. And I asked myself, how much of what we are discussing here today actually filters to the ordinary man and woman, which lives are affected by the very subject in which we are asked to make our presentation. But I don't have a lot of time, and therefore my concentration must be centered around the fishing industry. The fishing industry is a major contributor to national GDP and play an important role in the creation of employment in the rural and blue industry. Data has shown that the worth of that industry is somewhere in the region of $90 to $100 million in the national economy annually. But you would appreciate that a major chunk of what the fishermen or the fishing industry contribute towards the national economy goes towards this entity that is involved in the supply and distribution of fossil fuel or fossil product. The average fishers or pelagic boat fishers that goes out regularly during the pelagic season consume an average of about 800 to 1,000 EC dollars on a day trip to go out for their catch. And I look around and I ask myself, with all the bright brains and everything that we have discussed here, why is it in this day and age that we have a situation, and I'm happy that I have Ms. Laura and the gentleman here who has made a lot of stride in the area to try and resolve some of that problem. But critically, like anything else, it doesn't seem like the powers or those who are responsible in terms of creating policy guidelines to help us are interested in using particularly local technology and innovation to help in areas of the economy and industries that is important to us. And so therefore, you are left to go overseas to see how best you can even stay above water. So we have a situation where in this day and age, I don't see no incentive being offered for better craft or craft with engine that would be more efficient or even using renewable energy. Another critical aspect of the industry is when I examine what is happening inland, I can see not only the threat to the livelihood of the fishing community and by extension the rural economy and what we have as the national food security because of our behavior upstream. I want to speak from my heart. Those of us who muddy the water upstream without no care or attention of the effect that it will have on those who are downstream will have a rude awakening one day when we wake up and realize that there is no movement below to take care of us. And I say this to say that I see the destruction at an alarming rate of our wetland and our mangrove, which is very critical in the preservation of the blue economy, not only to fishers, but for everyone who uses, including those who perhaps today are very instrumental in the destruction of that very ecosystem that is critical to the sustainability of our lives and every industry along the way. And I talk about the mangrove. The mangroves serve as a critical first-hand barrier against the destruction of our ocean and our coral reef. It serves as a filter to trap mud and siltation to prevent it from reaching the coral reef. And we are destroying that mangrove at an alarming rate in the name of development, not understanding the critical impact that it will have, not only on the fishing industry, but the entire economy of our land if we do not stop that reckless course and behavior. That same mangrove serves as a nursery, and it serves as a nursery to protect and for the upkeep of our fish stock in this country. All the snappers, both the mahogany and the mangrove snappers, the grunt, the Margaret, the tapan, all of them need the mangrove in order for them to continue to strive and survive. And if we don't understand that our behavior upstream and what we do on land have a direct impact downstream and in our ocean, and we continue to behave as if we are the only one that are important, without embracing each other and work together with each other to prevent the total collapse of not only the fishing industry, but of our ocean and waterways, then we will be in for rude awakening. I say so. It cannot be right in this day and age that we have a Ministry of Infrastructure who you mean to tell me do not have an environmentalist within that ministry to inform the ministry that it cannot desilk waterways and rivers 2 or 3 weeks before the hurricane season or the rainy season. That the disturbance of the soil is going to create problems so that when the rain comes down, the deposit of that silk and mud goes directly upon our coral reef, thereby creating serious problem for the coral reef and for our fish stock. And also for the very people that we invite here, so that they can dive and see the pristine nature of our water. Today, before you have any level of wind activity, almost no one can use the sea. The very tourists. So those who are involved in our development and in the tourism industry are doing a disservice to themselves by not paying attention to the activities that is being done upstream. And I have said so to the ministry that you need to embark on a program of desilting our rivers 6 to 4 months before the rainy season, thereby giving the soil sufficient time to harden up and for the vegetation to regrow, so that we do not have a situation where it rains and all the mud goes onto our coral reef. My people, as I listen to everybody here today, I ask myself, what is the significance of this exercise? I've learned quite a bit, I must say. But I've wondered how many of this actually reaches the people who needs to know of what is happening. We have to create a balance. We are only passerbys here, you know. We have a very short time to live here. We have to live an environment that the generation after us is going to enjoy. We need to preserve what we have. I cannot end without mentioning that, you know, I heard Mr. Ramirez this morning mention of innovation in terms of being done on the field. And I remember when my father was first introduced to the banana industry, and they wanted him to become a banana farmer. After 2 years of practicing banana cultivation, my father decided that he was no longer going to continue in that area, because he saw firsthand the level of soil degradation and erosion that was happening on the slope as a result, and the level of poison and chemical that was being dumped into the waterway as a result of the banana industry. And he moved away from it, and my father, being a farmer all his life, never used neither pesticide, weedicide, etc. And he planted, I wanted to say something that is a bit laughable, but he wanted to plant 3 crops to protect the soil. And it brings me back to the report that is now coming out of Martinique. And I wonder whether it is true here today, and that because we are not interested, or we believe that we do not have the voice, that we have left our farmers and our rural community powerless to carry out an assessment of the detrimental effect that those poisons have had on our community and our waterways. Today, Martinique is said that not even the drinking water in Martinique is considered safe. and that the fish stock around the coastline of Martinique is unsafe as a result of a particular pesticide. So when we do things, when we are all about developing ways of making good money and making things and life easier for us, we must consider the implication that it is going to have, not only on those who do not care about, but also on our own lives, because it will always come back to haunt us. Because there must be a balance. And if you are on a seesaw, and you believe that you can cause somebody to crumble as a result of your behavior, you better watch it, that when that person has crumbled, you yourself from a higher height will come crumbling down. And I want to say to you today that I'm very thankful that you have made it possible to give us a voice that we can articulate our position and what is affecting us. But I want to see a forum that can reach out to the ordinary man and woman on the street, because who feels it, knows it. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Maggie. I turn now to Jerry George to continue.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be taking over from Mr. Giles Romulus, who has done a fantastic job all morning long, and I know he needs the rest. So I'm very happy to do that. And Madam Chair, I will certainly follow your advice, because you heard the words she used, brutal. So I'm going to be careful in not even reading the preamble I had for this, so as for us to get the time. But I just want to comment on what Mr. Ricky Bagdoum had said. And it seems through all the presentation, there needs to be an innovation in media and communication, as well as public information, for the trickle effect, the trickle-down effect of all what's happening in terms of the innovation and all the wonderful things we're speaking about to get to the people who need to hear as to what is happening. We really, really need that. But listening to all the presentations too, I think that the overriding theme is that there is innovation, or there is need for innovation in the innovation. You know, we have perhaps lost our way somewhere, and we need to sort of get back in terms of getting the information to others. Our next luminary is Dr. Nikaya Dorr, whose interest is electrical and electronic engineering, joining us from the University of Bristol in the UK via Zoom.
Are we all good? Sorry, I'm not actually able to hear or see anyone. So if you are able to just give me some feedback that you can hear me and you can see my slide deck.
Yes, we can hear you. We're seeing your presentation also on screen.
All right, brilliant. Just want to say thank you for inviting me, and it's been really inspirational to be part of this meeting today. And in the interest of time, I will kick off with my short introduction and an account of my journey in the industry of research and innovation as well. So I'd like to start with a bit of background about myself. Right now, I'm the founder and chief executive officer of Boretic Limited. We're a multi-award winning UK startup. And prior to that, I was a member of the UK Department for International Trade Global Entrepreneur Programme. And as part of my career, I've also held an enterprise fellowship at the Quantum Technology Enterprise Center. And prior to that, I was in research within the photonics group at the University of Bristol. And during that time, I authored 14 publications, and some of my favorites went to international conferences in New York, Shanghai, and Beijing. Academically, I did undergraduate and a PhD in electrical and electronic engineering, but I haven't been with the university for a little while, so just a little bit of an update there. So on a daily basis, I lead an interdisciplinary team of scientists and business leaders, and we're tackling major diagnostic challenges. We all share a common vision that everyone should receive the optimal antibiotic treatment from their first visit to the doctor, because it saves time, it saves money, and ultimately it will save lives. And to that end, we've been developing, in fact, we invented and patented a novel test called Nanoplex. And the entire thesis around it is to reduce the time to diagnose bacterial infections from 2 days to 15 minutes. And the benefits of that is wide reaching. So over the next minute or so, I'll share a short video which explains the basis of the test and how it works. So changing gears a little bit, how did I end up working on tests for urine-based infectious diseases? Well, back in 2000, I did all of my early education and even up to A levels in St. Lucia. I went to St. Mary's College. I'm very proud of that. And there I studied mostly science subjects. And in 2005, went on to Arthur Lewis Community College, and not unlike many other young St. Lucians, where I focused on math, chemistry, and biology. I even forgot it for a while there. In 2007, I was really fortunate to be awarded one of 3 Island Scholar full scholarships to pursue education outside of St. Lucia. But before taking up that offer, I actually spent 2 years working with my oldest brother, Sebastian, at IDC. And that gave me a really good foundation and grounding before going off to study outside of St. Lucia. So from 2009 to 2012, I actually did an undergraduate degree in electrical and electronic engineering. And as part of that, that program, the honors program, we were all required to do a short research project with one of the research groups within the department. And my particular project was actually, it was my first exposure to structured research. And it involved modeling wireless signal propagation, so how Wi-Fi signal spreads in the house. And that is a lot more complicated than it actually sounds, but it was for an important purpose. At the time, the research group was trying to figure out how do we guarantee that every corner of a house has Wi-Fi signal. And the reason for this is because we're looking at smart houses where an older person who is reliant on care from third parties could potentially live independently. And so they're probably wearing some kind of gadget like a Fitbit, which monitors their vitals. And so you need to make sure that no matter where they are in the house, if something were to happen, you could always pick up on that. And so that was a really good introduction to research. And in 2012, I graduated top of my class and then moved back to St. Lucia for a few months before the university got in touch and offered me a scholarship to come back for a PhD within the photonics group. Now, my research there was focused on nano antenna technology. So that's effectively, I spent time researching ways to make tiny structures about 1,000th of the size of the human hair to manipulate light on that tiny scale. And I'll mention the application again because a lot of the reason I'm still in research and innovation is because of the outcomes and how it could improve life. And so the application of that was to pick up on very small signatures for early detection of oil spills and even for monitoring water quality. So that work was actually funded by a Swiss company called ABB. And if you're not familiar with the name, you may have seen their products if you've ever looked at an Iron Man film, because those robots were actually made by ABB, the ones that assembled his suit. So after finishing the PhD in 2016, I actually went on to do a short research contract, building again on the theme of applied research. It was a short contract between the University of Bristol, Cardiff University and Bath University. And we were using our collective knowledge to find new ways to accelerate the detection of hospital-acquired infections. And that was, I think, probably one of the catalysts for the direction that Fluoretica has taken. But it was also aided by an enterprise fellowship that I was awarded by QTech while still on that program. And QTech effectively paid for me to retrain at Cranfield School of Management. So I did business training to commercialize research of my choosing. So that was a very rare and really good opportunity, which I think was a pivotal point in my career. Now, I was asked to share some of the challenges that I faced along the way, and I've just highlighted 3 of them. And I think it will apply to most of us who are in this space, and I'll share them nonetheless. So the first is the complexity of it. The thing about research and innovation in and of itself is you're often tackling problems that problems of human curiosity that people before you haven't necessarily addressed. And so there's limited information to know whether you're on the right track or not. And so you kind of have to go through the process iteratively. And as part of that, you tend to get, well, for me, I had to get comfortable with complexity. And even more so in my current role, I do need to get comfortable with complexity of going through that problem-solving process. The next element is competition. It's not immediately obvious when you look at the field, but research, academic research in particular, and even innovation is a very competitive space. And I'll explain what I mean by that by way of numbers. So if you take the UK, for example, every year, 8,500 people graduate with PhDs. And as of last night, there are about 1,400 jobs available in research. And so even if you're fortunate enough to get one of those roles, it becomes really competitive to retain those roles and to move on to tenureship or professorship. And so it's really important to always be at your best, any opportunity that you have to show up and to deliver your best, because the space is really competitive. The third element, and that one's a little bit tricky to explain, but rejection. So throughout your research career, your work will be judged by a jury of your peers. And you have to get comfortable with criticism. Sometimes it's constructive, other times it's not really, but you do have to get comfortable with criticism. And even when you've cracked a very important research question or generated new information, it's not guaranteed that the journal of your choice would actually publish your work. So it's another area of resilience that you need to build up. But it's not all doom and gloom. I've also assembled some of the thoughts behind what I think contributed to my success, or the success I've enjoyed so far. And I'll just put a caveat here that this is very much subjective. And so these are my own, and if anyone would like to use them, please feel free to do so. the first I would point out is dedication, and I'll elaborate on this by way of an example. I mentioned that during my PhD, I was developing nano antennas, so these tiny structures. In fact, they were 1/10 millionth of a meter in size, which pushes the boundaries of what you could engineer reproducibly. So it took me about 6 months to actually come up with my first viable sample. And even then, although it was viable, it didn't work the way I expected it to. So I had to go around that loop continuously in order to get the success that I was looking for. The next important element, and this cannot be overstated, is the support network. I've been really fortunate from a very young age and even to now to have family and friends and people around me who continuously believed in me and pushed me to keep going and encouraging me and opening doors for me. And today is one of those examples. So I can't overstate this one, that is really important to have a good support network. And I'll come back to this later on when I talk about recommendations. And the final piece is the hand of God. And this is very true. And I'll explain this by way of example again, that for those of us who are familiar with the Island Scholar Award, it's usually given to 2 people each year. But in 2007, if I'm not mistaken, an exception was actually made to award it to 3 of us. And so that opened the door to my research career. The next element is that I'm a St. Lucian running a tech business in the UK. And we've been really fortunate to have had investment from both public and private sector to develop both the technology and the business. So I'll stop sharing for a second. And in terms of my suggestions around innovation and what we could do back home, from what I could see, we have all of the backbone elements to actually drive an innovation ecosystem. So over here, it is really a big industry. Every time you hear of companies like Microsoft, we'll be speaking later, these companies are knowledge-intensive companies. They are by nature research-intensive companies, and they do well for the public through the products they release, and also for the taxman through the revenues they return. And so it really does require input and support from the government to actually build this ecosystem. So I'll give a few suggestions of how that happens. The first is an innovation grants. I know that for certain, my company has been really fortunate with a number of innovation grants that helped us bootstrap in the early days. And for some investors, that was actually a requirement to have some kind of government backing behind you before they put some money in. The second element is around tax reform. Small companies, small businesses contribute significantly to the economy. And if you want growth in an economy, you actually want to encourage small businesses, and generating small businesses, they create employment and they create tax revenue. And so one of the things that has been done over here, and I know for certain it is being done in other countries as well that I've visited, is investor relief. So if someone in this room has supported our colleagues who've been working on the desalination plant, we should incentivize that. We should incentivize people to actually put their hard-earned money into supporting the pioneers of the future who can create products and services to better the country and the world at large. And finally, I think the other element is more of a regional one. We've got a stock exchange. We've got several of them. And that is an exit route. So you typically have, exits via trade sale or through public sale of businesses, and that's how investors make their money back. But our stock exchange is very inactive. I wouldn't be able to go today and purchase a stock in a Caribbean business or a St. Lucian business on the basis that we haven't really encouraged everyone to participate in that part of the economy. And so I think these are areas that we could tackle to actually create more opportunities for people within the country to build new ideas, to build on them, to see that there's a future and success in it. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak and to share, and I do hope the rest of the program goes well.
Thank you, Dr. Dorr, for sharing your journey with us. And I'm just remembering that every year we put on a National Schools Science Fair, usually at the Derek Walcott Square, and you see these children eager to talk about the experiments that they have devised for that particular year. And once that is over, you just see it packed up and it disappears, you know. I like the idea of the fund so that even at this early stage, we can start putting in some money to see that some of the better projects begin to grow wings to fly. Our next speaker is Dr. Keith Nurse, who is a principal at Sir Arthur Lewis Community College. I know him in earlier times when he visited St. Lucia talking about the cultural industries and the economic impact that the cultural industries have on the economies across the Caribbean. Dr. Nurse?
Thank you very much, Chair. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very delighted to be invited to participate in what I consider to be a game-changer event. It's also great to be speaking right after one of our alumnus from the college, so that's very gratifying. I was waiting to see him say a little box saying, you know, one of these elements of the success was education in St. Lucia. Obviously, it was, and evidently so. Yes. I need to tell him that we've changed our logo so he can update his slide. I've spoken on the issue of innovation so many times, in so many places. And before coming to St. Lucia to pick up this job, I was working at the OECD in Paris, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and running their unit for structural policies and innovation. And over the last several months, I've been working on the innovation plans for different countries. Dominican Republic was the portfolio I worked on the most in that time, but we were also working on Egypt and Shenzhen in China. So not for all of China, but Shenzhen. But Shenzhen is like equivalent to all of the developing world multiplied by 10 in terms of the quantum of innovation. And 40, 50 years ago, it was a small fishing village with a very small population. So what is it I'm trying to share? Much of what we're discussing today is actually nation innovation, which needs to be distinguished from talking about innovators, which is having innovative people per se, or innovative individuals, or innovative firms. It's about talking about an ecosystem that generates innovators and innovative firms, and so on. In effect, it's a discussion about a governance structure, what I call innovation governance. So every society has innovators, innovative firms, and so on. What really matters is the quantum and the speed, and so on. So for example, is your innovation level low or high? Is it slow or fast? Is it ad hoc or is it structured? Is it fragmented or is it organized? And then lastly, is it undocumented or is it documented? Well, One of the things with innovation, especially in a developing country context, is the latter. There tends to be no data and no information on the level of innovation. So if you go and you do some research on St. Lucia in terms of innovation, you would be hard-pressed to find good quality information that can be benchmarked against other countries in the world. And that applies to most countries in the Caribbean. So for example, the only country in the Caribbean that generates consistent data on R&D expenditures as a share of GDP is Trinidad and Tobago, my home country. And for the last 20 years or so, the expenditure of Trinidad and Tobago on research and development has been 0.05% of GDP, and consistently so. So, and this is an oil-rich hydrocarbon economy that has no shortage of resources in relative terms. So most Caribbean countries fall probably way below that. The expenditure level for R&D as a share of GDP that is recommended for a developing country to progress in the world is 1% of GDP. Most developing countries that are doing well, or if you could call them developing countries anymore, are spending 2 or 3 times that, meaning they're spending 2, 3, even as much as 5% of their GDP on research and development. So a country like Trinidad and Tobago is spending less than a quarter, less than 10% of what it should be spending to do well. Far more to be globally competitive. That means that if we look at a country like St. Lucia or any other Caribbean country, we are severely under-investing in research and development. And so if it is we are actually interested in making a quantum leap forward, then we need to change the discussion. Because the debate we're having is an interesting one, a very useful one, but as I always said, and I said that my good friend, Dame Pearl Louisette, when we were stepping out the room for lunch, where is the money? Because ultimately, it comes down to resources, human resources, but also financial resources. So just a week ago, I made a presentation to the Ministers of Education of the OECS. We had a discussion about tertiary education in the OECS territories. So the night before, I said, okay, let me see if I could find some data, because I do research on innovation. And so I collected the data from the World Bank on expenditure on tertiary education as a share of government expenditure on education. Right? So this is how much you're spending on tertiary relative to how much you're spending on education. The average for the Latin America and the Caribbean is about 20%, almost 21%. The OECS average is 8%. St. Lucia's average over a number of years is 5%. So St. Lucia is below the OECS average, and it is operating at 1/3 of the average for Latin America and the Caribbean. Now, I'm not even comparing Latin America and the Caribbean with some of the Asian countries, because if you compare Latin America and the Caribbean with Asian countries, which are the countries that we have to compete with, we are probably, as a region, 1/3, if not a quarter, of what they are spending on research and development. So, where do we go from here? Well, the first thing that we have to do is, first of all, develop the data infrastructure on what it is we are doing and what we are spending our resources on. And estimate what is the economic impact or the return on that investment. So there are those who argue that we spend a lot on education, and in some respects we do. 5 to 6% of our GDP, in most instances across the region, if not higher. But several of our presenters, including my colleague, Dr. Felix, lamented the quality of our educational experience. Having 2 teenagers of my own, I can tell you that, yes, we are stifling innovation in our children, and we do it in a very systematic and a very systemic way. In fact, our education system is actually designed to do so, to snuff out the creativity and innovation in our children, because children are supposed to be quiet, well-behaved, and so on. And there's a gender dimension to it as well, particularly targeted at boys. And I gave the feature address at several years ago in Barbados when I was working there at the Barbados Secondary School Association's conference, and I was asked to talk about masculinities. So when I was finished, 3 teachers came up to me, female teachers of course, because over 90%, in fact probably 98% of our teachers are female at the primary and secondary school. And they said something to me that I've never forgotten. They said, you know, we treat boys like bad behaved girls, because they don't sit still. They come into the classroom very sweaty very often, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. So our school systems are actually designed to temper all of that. And so the result that we get are really people who cannot think out of the box. Those who are able to get out of the box are the people that we've seen on the screens all day long. They are the exception to the rule. But it is these exceptions that prove the rule, which is that institutionally we are starving ourselves of innovation. So I will just end now to say that at the college, we have an uphill task as well, which is that if you compare the St. Louis Community College with some of its comparators, even competitors, our share of PhD staff, people who have actually been trained to do research at a higher level, is low. It's at 8%. At the University of Guyana, it's 16% of their staff have PhDs. And at UWI, where I used to work, 80% of their staff have PhDs. And so the quantum leap that is required to move to become an innovation nation is very significant. And the resources that are required to make that leap need to be prepared and organized in a very structured, organized way. There's a way to do it, and I think we have the capabilities, but we have to be clear by setting benchmarks, targets, with all the required metrics. So beyond this very august meeting and the exceptional presentations, I think we need to set ourselves a very, very simple but specific task, which is to say, let us document where we are at now. And let us identify where we would like to be in 10 years from now and or 20 years from now. And in which specific sectors do we consider it to be a priority? So I saw the presentation on apiculture yesterday and again today. I think that's an excellent area. Some areas of the blue economy. Of course, we have to do agri-tech areas. And of course, we have to catch up with fintech, medtech, digital technologies, and so on. But you can't do everything in a small place. You have to figure out where you can make a difference in terms of your export capabilities, but also in terms of employment generation. And so that's what I would like to offer. At the college, we can help the government of St. Lucia and all the key stakeholders come up with a very specific innovation plan. I've been doing this for several years. I've just done it for Dominican Republic. I'm working on Egypt, I've worked on China. We can pull together a team to prepare, and that's what I'd like to offer. We are doing other things. We have just set up an e-learning academy. We're just about to establish, thanks to help from several stakeholders in St. Lucia and outside of St. Lucia, to set up an innovation lab and a startup center. We are also working on an upskilling academy with the private sector. And last but not least, we are working on establishing a digital and creative academy, which is one of my pet areas of research. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
I would just like to advise the remaining speakers, while we do want to hear everything and everything that you say, we do have a time limit to be here. So please make your presentations to time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. From Dr. Nurse, where is the money? Where is the data? Let me call on now Mr. Noorani Aziz. Is he with us? Noorani Aziz? Okay, he's not here with us via Zoom, but we will move on to our next speaker, Mr. Jabade Delis, student from Sir Arthur Lewis Community College via Zoom. Are you there, Mr. Delis?
Yes.
Okay. You're on, so go right ahead, please.
Hello?
We're seeing you. Go ahead.
Hello, sir. Are you hearing?
Yes, we're hearing you. Hello? Yes. Mr. Delis, you can go right ahead.
The protocol which has already been established. Good day. I am Jibade Olushola Delis, second year student of Sir Arthur Lewis Community College. Currently pursuing an associate degree in environmental science. Firstly, I'd like to thank God and the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College for granting me this opportunity. Additionally, all the organizers of this prestigious event, I would like to say thank you for this opportunity. Today, I will just be sharing my views on how some ways in which I believe, as a young person, the family, the community, the state, and the education system can ignite the interest of the young people in research and development in their formative years and beyond. Okay. Firstly, I believe that greater sensitization on research and innovation must be done to increase the awareness amongst young people. If there are many ideas and many suggestions and solutions. However, if we as young people are not knowledgeable of, the benefits, the how to, we cannot efficiently endeavor into that field and be effective in that field. So I believe that that'll be my first suggestion. Secondly, I believe that the research and integration and innovation should be integrated through curriculum activities from very young, so that we young people could have an idea and awareness cultivated into us So it will be easier for us to maneuver into those fields and to explore those options, especially as we grow and develop, in whichever field that we look towards. For example, the research and integration and innovation, could be implemented into games. So let's say the preschoolers, so they would have, young preschoolers, they could be introduced at school or preschools. So they could just be open. It would increase, they could be more aware of these, or that field, and it'd be easier. Let's look at the reading month initiative, which is very successful. It is common knowledge now that reading month it's an annual activity amongst young people. However, the main and most important factor that contributed to this common knowledge is that it has started and has been continued from the time we are very, very young. So we have become accustomed and grown knowledgeable in that field, and it has increased our awareness and our appeal to that field. It makes it more appealing to us. Yes. A third point, a third suggestion would be, I believe that the relevant authorities should ensure fully functional research and innovation labs for young people to be exposed till university. Now, I know this one would require necessary funding. However, I just want to put the suggestion. I just want to say the suggestion to, yes. With this, we'll be able to, like for instance, the annual science fair, all these great ideas can be further developed by the relevant persons who are equipped in that field. And this would lend itself to, more development in that field, more development in research and innovation, and a brighter scope of endeavors and benefits to the country and the world at large. Yes. I know my time is short. To conclude, I would like to end by sharing this quote by Dr. Albert Szent-Györgyi. Innovation is seeing what everybody has seen and thinking what nobody has thought. I repeat, innovation is seeing what everybody has seen and thinking what nobody has thought. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delis. Our next speaker will be Dr. James Fletcher, and he will make his presentation on the title, Infusion of Innovation in Sustainable Development. I know that Dr. Fletcher is here. Let's go over to him right now.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Hello, everyone. I am hoping that you are seeing my screen. Can you just tell me yes, that you are?
Yes, we're seeing you bright and clear.
Right. So I've been asked to speak on the infusion of research and innovation in sustainability and sustainable development. And I guess it probably would be good to start off with what is sustainability? What is sustainable development? And I think one or two of our speakers have referenced sustainable development as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability.
We're seeing you, but not your screen.
You're seeing me or not my screen? Okay, why is that? Just give me 1 second.
Got it. The screen is on now.
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. Right, so I've been asked to speak on the infusion of research and innovation into sustainable development in St. Lucia. And we should start off with what is sustainable development. And I think one or two of our speakers have referenced sustainable development as being development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So really, why is sustainable development important to us? Well, a few obvious things. Our economy is ailing. Some people might say it's failing, but I prefer to say it's ailing. If you look at GDP growth in the Caribbean, that very last line is GDP growth in Caribbean developing in CDB borrowing member countries. You'll see it's way below that of the advanced economies, way below that of the world, way below that of small developing states, and way below that of other emerging market and developing economies. St. Lucia's debt to GDP ratio is climbing, and it has been climbing steadily for the last 30 years. But also the debt burden being carried by every single individual is also rising very steeply from just below $1,000, which was debt per capita in 1990, to somewhere around $7,000 now in 2020. And that's alarming. And COVID will only worsen the problem. When you look at some of the projections that the IMF has for what is going to happen with GDP in our countries, you will see that there will be significant declines, and it will take us some time before we recover from this. Our environmental indicators are also unhealthy. I will not go into a long thesis on climate change. I think we all know what has been happening, but suffice it to say that the last 6 years have been the hottest 6 years in the history of our planet. So 2019, 2016 were tied for the two hottest years, and even this year is on track to be one of the hottest 5 years in the history of our planet. This is St. Lucia. Environmental problems, solid waste, problems with solid waste disposals, problems with flooding, problems with land degradation and land use, problems with our management of our marine space. And at the global level, the planetary boundaries that were established to determine just how well we are keeping within our space, we've exceeded all of them. So really, I think this says that it is time for change. We can't continue doing things the way we've always done it. And Plato is in the Republic is credited with saying necessity is the mother of invention. We're not sure if Plato actually did say that, but I think we can agree that necessity causes us to be innovative. And the OECD has really pointed it out that innovation has played an important role in the development of successful developing countries in the last 2 decades. And good thing is that innovation does not have to originate in a laboratory or a high technology company. I think Giles mentioned that earlier today. It should start at the school level, and there's been reference most recently, Jabadi and others have spoken about our science fairs. We treat these science fair projects like carnival costumes, that we look at them, we judge them, and then we cast them aside. There's some excellent work, excellent research, excellent innovation that has gone into this, but you know, we don't look to see whether they're commercially viable. We don't look to see whether there's any way of rewarding our children by giving them some way of promoting and continuing that quest that they have for innovation. We just cast them aside, and every year we do the same thing. Our education system, as has been said by many, particularly Marie-Louise Felix, it must promote and must encourage curiosity, scientific inquiry, and challenging of the status quo. It is not doing that right now. So we can't have an innovative culture if at the school level we're not promoting innovation. But it's not just our children. Our elders also have an important role to play. They possess valuable information and experience, and we really must make greater use of indigenous and traditional knowledge. What we dismiss as folklore is actually the accumulation of generations of observation, of cause and effect, data in several different environmental conditions by hundreds of informal researchers specific to our unique local conditions. You can't get more rigorous empirical observation than that, but we dismiss it as, you know, just folklore. But these things are things that our ancestors have looked at, and they've realized that there is a cause and effect. Why aren't we using it? We must free up access to information and data. I think many people, including Dr. Nurse, spoke about access to data and managing data. Access to knowledge and information is a critical factor for the development of our society. We're not doing that. We're not making it available. Our governments must also recognize and value our natural assets. I was very pleased to hear how passionately Ricky spoke on this. Something simple like the featherless. Our featherless snake, the symptoms of a bite from the featherless resemble symptoms of some major forms of heart disease, and it may provide a model for future treatments, but that's not unprecedented. The first ACE inhibitor, which is used to treat hypertension, actually came from the venom from a Brazilian pit viper. which is a Bothrops species, same like our Bothrops caribeus, which is the St. Lucian featherless, but we're not doing any research into this. Deadly toxins to life-saving therapeutics, many have been gotten from vipers like ours. And if you look at the Kentucky Reptile Zoo, you'll see that the venom from our featherless is being sold at $250 per gram. It's actually one of the most expensive products you could buy from the Kentucky Reptile Zoo, but we haven't patented it. We're not, if any drugs like captopril, which is the ACE inhibitor that was gotten from the Brazilian viper, if anything like that comes out, St. Lucia will get no benefit from it whatsoever. These are things that we need to be looking into. You go to Whole Foods or Holland and Barrett in the UK, and what products do you see there? Bitter lemon, bitter melon, kokum kuli, turmeric, chichima, ginger, graviola leaf tea from soursop, which is supposed to be a strong anti-carcinogen. And the nutraceuticals market is forecast to record yearly growth of over 8% per year, but we're not taking advantage of that. These are all products that we have in St. Lucia: Japana, Veven Lachewat, Gwenaba Fay, all of these things, no real research to see how we can commercialize them. Our banana industry has come from this, but when you go again into Whole Foods, this is what you see, all sorts of banana products, but yet we say we don't have a market for our bananas. Are we focusing on the right things? Are we introducing innovation? These are the things that we have to look at. We really have to provide consistent support to our innovators. We heard from Carlos and Laura today. Carlos and Laura, there's Joanne, there's Gillan, Chadia, Laura. So many have done really good work, but are we saying to our hotels that they must buy Carlos's Life Cube and put it in there, because every single one of these hotels have problems with water availability? So are we encouraging the hotels to buy the Life Cube and put it in there so that they can solve their water problems? We're not. We have to invest heavily in our youth. I heard a lot of talk about having a research institute, but 4 years ago, I gave the feature address at the launch of the Von Allen Lewis Institute for Research and Innovation. That was supposed to be the institute that would promote research and innovation in our country. What has happened to Valeri? Why isn't Valeri being that place where we collect all of that information, serve as a repository for all of the innovation, as Giles said, from farm to field, from dancehall to dojo, everything that people are doing, and see how we can turn that into commercial opportunity for us to improve on our socioeconomic profile. We're not doing that. We have an institute. Let's use it. Why don't we provide fellowships for promising young and budding innovators to be at Valeri, to focus exclusively on creating, innovating, without having to worry about where the next paycheck comes from? These are some of the things that I think we can do. You know, Walt Disney said it very, very clearly. If you can dream it, you can do it. And I think this era that we're living in is showing very clearly. Research and innovation will help us to get out of the low growth, high debt, high unemployment, low wage trap we're in. Nothing else will do it. There is no model, no economic model that we are pursuing right now that will do it. Could be tourism. Nothing will do it, because we've seen where that has landed us. We have to focus on research and innovation. And it will also help us to address some of the persistent vexing problems, stimulate our economy, create jobs, and have that balanced development we talk about. We're living in a global knowledge economy where neurons, what causes our brains to communicate, our nerve fibers to fire, neurons are much more valuable than euros. And I think when we realize that and we understand that investing in our people is the most important investment we can make, then maybe we'll get out of this problem. Thank you very much.
A splendid reminder there from Dr. Jimmy Fletcher. And I think earlier we had heard from Dr. Cato, and he was saying, difficult, yes. Impossible, no. So maybe this is the time for us to rethink. Well, we move on to another section right now, and we are looking to hear from Dr. Whitney Henry, and we will meet him via Zoom from MIT, Cambridge in Boston. Yes, okay. Yes, we can hear you. And we've just seen your presentation on the screen. So, Dr. Whitney Henry, please go ahead.
Sure. So first of all, I'd like to Whitehead Institute for Biomedical Research, which is an affiliate of MIT, which is located in Cambridge, in Massachusetts, in the US. And my research largely focuses on identifying and understanding the complex biological processes that occur within cancer cells that allows them to gain the capabilities to become resistant to both chemo and immune therapies, as well as to gain properties that allow them to metastasize, which is to disseminate from the primary site where the tumor forms, for example, the breast, to distant organs like the brain and the lung and bone and so on. So what are those processes or dependencies of cancer cells? With the hopes that by understanding those fundamental processes, one might be able to extrapolate that information to inform more efficacious strategies for the treatment of this disease. And to do this, I actually use a very multidisciplinary approach. It involves very sophisticated molecular tools, advanced gene editing techniques like CRISPR-Cas9, which some of you may have known, may have heard of. I also work with extremely talented and smart people in the fields of both bioengineering, computer science, and in some cases, physician scientists. So right now, science is kind of moving into this collaborative mode, I would say, not only within academia, but between academia and the biotech, pharma, tech industry. So it's really an exciting time to be part of research, especially in the context of cancer biology. Now, in keeping with the theme and the mandate that was given to me by Mr. Romulus, I wanted to now shift gears a little and really tell you about my scientific journey and experience. And I'm hoping that for the young people, especially who are listening and watching, that this will inspire you and hopefully get you to think a little bit more about what research might entail and what a career in this area might look like. So I entitled my presentation Against All Odds, and I hope, and maybe at the end of this presentation, it'll become a little clear to you why. So it all began in the town of Beaufort, where I was born, and I came from very humble circumstances, was adopted and brought up by the Burt family. For 7 years, I traveled from Beaufort to Castries to attend the St. Joseph's Convent Secondary School, followed by the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College. I then taught high school for about 1 year, a little bit I spent some time at SJC as well as at the Meekwood Secondary School. After which I was very fortunate to earn a full academic scholarship to attend